What we have here is a variable speed 1.5 horse treadmill motor. The plan is to replace that single speed 1 horse motor with a treadmill motor. Nobody starts out old, but it doesn't take long to get there. All things come to an end, just not yet. Roller doesn't have a knob for speed. It's up and down, stop, and we'll see what else. I thought all treadmills had a knob like ours. I didn't realize this one did not until we'd driven 100 miles to get it. Probably the first thing to do, plug it in and see if it runs. Okay, we've got an on-off switch over here. It says off. Got a controller here. And a plug somewhere. We have a dead man switch. And one of these goes in here. No idea what this is. Well, I got this figured out. 2 metal plates here, no obvious purpose. This has got to go somewhere. The magnet, put it on, activate. Now the switch will go on and stay on. Enter weight. I'll put my own. We don't care what the weight is. Enter. Select mode. Manual. Good. Speed. The reason for this power conversion is that my 60-year-old lathe has 4 speeds. To change the speed, you have to loosen the motor so you can move the belt from one pulley pair to another. This is extremely tedious. I thought a knob, like a modern lathe, would work fine. I didn't realize this controller didn't have a knob, and I may have to convert yet again, but not today. So now, I'll figure out how to put this into a space 12 inches wide. Okay, this has to be here. I think I'm going to put it at this level, get a shorter belt. With all this electronic stuff, I don't want it down on the floor in the dirt. It's easier to cut a hole through here than down there anyway. I can completely bypass all the switching. I don't know where I'm going to put this. Here, perhaps. First thing I have to do is get that out. Easier said than done. In addition to the bolts in front, they were easy to get at. The motor is mounted on an axle and back so it can pivot up and down. Reaching back there was not easy. Done. Okay. Next, I had to figure out how to mount the controller in such a manner that I could read it without bending over and easily reach the buttons. I had to transfer this 4-position pulley from the old motor to the new one. It didn't want to come off. I got out my old pulley puller. I hadn't thought to check if the motor shafts are the same size, but they are. A little bit of corrosion on the treadmill motor shaft makes this a tight fit. I clean it up with a little abrasive cloth. Now I have to figure out what size hole to cut into the wall of the lathe cabinet. Gloves. Those sparks are hot. Gloves anyway. There isn't much room in my shop. Doing anything requires moving something. I'm gonna clean that up with a file, I guess. I don't know how best to do that. Okay, now we have the fan attached. Not 100% concentric, but plenty close enough. But we don't have the use of this position anymore. Probably quite all right. I first thought to use a plumb bob to line up the upper and lower pulleys, but the floor isn't quite flat, so the lathe isn't quite vertical. So I used a level to determine how far off vertical and a ruler and lined the pulleys up that way. So that's about what it's going to look like in here. Build something more substantial here, of course. Got to poke a hole in the bottom for the power cord. I use a magnet to pick up the steel filings from the shelf in the floor. I don't want to be crawling around in those. I covered the sharp edges of the hole with Gorilla Tape to protect the power cord from abrasion. Well, here's where it'll sit. Need to build a platform here. I've got storage space underneath. Oh yeah, this clips onto the panel. I don't know what that little thingy jobby there does. I'll just let it hang free and do whatever it wants to do. And I'll put the panel up here someplace. I have vacuum cleaners hooked up to most of my dust making tools, but for the jointer, I just open the door and let it spit the chips right outside. I need to round off the corners a little bit. Okay, it's in. I had to shave down a pencil to fit the slots for the mounting bolts. I needed to cut the belt down to its new size and stitch it together so I could take it to probably an auto parts store and get a belt exactly the right size. I had only a little room for adjustment. I could adapt to a belt a hair too short, but not one too long. Drill 3 small holes in each end. And I got some really fine soft wire, and I'm going to see if I can get these ends sewed together while it's on the machine. Hard part is going to be getting this back up here. This task was extremely tedious and time-consuming. I cut out about 90% of it. The first wire is finally in, but I can't draw any of them up tight until they're all started, and then I have to snug one at a time, a little more and a little more, until all 3 are tight. This does seem like an awful lot of trouble, just to get a smaller belt to measure for a new belt. But as I was doing this, I realized this might be a strong enough stitching job that I can use the belt, at least until it breaks. I was glad when that job was finished. What we're doing is putting on a shelf the controller. I didn't have small screws long enough to go through the controller box, so Gorilla Tape and staples. Just to keep dust and chips from getting underneath it. I need to cover this hole. I don't know what that's for. And then I've got to build a cover for this. And we'll be in business. $4.45. About 890 or 2 miles an hour. Knowing precisely what RPM the lathe is turning at isn't necessary, but I made a chart to convert miles per hour to RPM, so I'd have an idea. Off doesn't appear to do anything. I can shut it off by pulling the dead man switch, which is okay, except that trips this switch back here, which is a pain in the butt to get to. I'm going to see if I can move that. I clipped a zip tie and found there was plenty of extra wire to move the switch all the way to the front. This piece of 2x2 is the only part of the wooden cover that's fastened to the lathe. So it's complete. So I finished a box, drilled ventilation holes so the cooling fan can blow air through. Got an on-off switch mounted outside the box instead of on the back, or the electronics for the motor. Have our controller here. Well, here's how this works. Okay, it's completely off. Dead man switch is pulled. It's back on activate. Turn my switch back on here.
Well, this was running fine just a minute ago.
This is embarrassing.
Wasn't this a pisser? I wonder if something I did with these screws it doesn't like. Okay, well, I take the lid off the box. Glad I didn't glue it. Now, this is still plugged in, so I need to be very careful. Now it's on. Okay, something about this installation, I think was the fact that this wire was partially pulled off in all my messing around here.
Now that my power conversion is complete, I have a question for you. I first encountered a lathe more than 60 years ago in junior high school. I made this mallet, which I still use, and this nut bowl, which was in my parents' house until they died. I've started playing around with the lathe, learning the tools, turning out a few crude bowls. It's a great deal of fun, and I think I'm going to be doing a lot of YouTube videos on wood turning. My question for you is, shall I make a separate channel dedicated to nothing but wood turning and keep the Oregon Old Timer channel as it is? Please leave your answer in the comments. As always, thanks for watching.